I think sometimes as music teachers, who this podcast is really for, we tend to forget that we were artists first, that we were musicians first. We get so caught up in all the logistics of teaching and pedagogy and program management that we tend to lose that part of ourselves that we were performers first, and we obviously loved something about it, which is why we got into teaching in the first place.
So true. That's so true. Well, that is so important. Is what is it that attracted us to music from the very, very beginning, and how do we maintain that relationship to music, which was begun out of desire and out of joy and out of fun and out of discovery and illumination, and then when we make a career out of it, and we now have this different kind of a relationship with music that has to do with getting a job and maintaining a job, let alone adding a family and all the other things that we have to go through, then this relationship with music gets tested.
You are listening to the Music Ed Mentor Podcast, where we teach music educators how to build, manage, and grow thriving school music programs and have long and happy careers. I am your host, Elisa Jansen-Jones, and you can follow my music education blog at professionalmusiceducator.com. If you've been a dedicated listener, you've probably figured out that most of these episodes are heavily edited, whether it's to blend together multiple guests or streamline the content so you're only getting the best of the best, or taking out weird noises that might distract you. I lovingly comb through every syllable of what's said between myself and whoever I have on as a guest. This episode is going to be a little different. It's probably the least edited, and for good reason. Barry Green has been teaching musicians, educators, and performers about the inner game of music for more than 30 years. Even if his first book, The Inner Game of Music, wasn't required reading, it appears over and over again as highly suggested one for music educators all over the world. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was dealing with an emotion I am rather uncomfortable with, but you could probably understand, and that's performance anxiety. Not as a horn player, but as a conductor rehearsing our community band. It's something that I've done for at least 6 months now, and even still, I get nervous and shaky before each rehearsal. Why? And what could I do to be proactively combating this feeling so that I can better serve my community, my students, be a better, more confident conductor? You know, everyone says you've got to get out of your own head, but once you're out of your head, where do you go? I did what so many of us do. I posted on Facebook and asked for tips to conquer performance anxiety. Many of you lovely folks gave excellent responses, from meditation to eating bananas to medication and mind tricks. And of course, the inner game of music came up time and time again. And it's not just about performance anxiety, it's about performing in general. Even having read The Inner Game of Music several times in the past, the insights I gleaned from Gary in this interview have helped me on multiple occasions since then. So get comfortable and ready to take notes. You are going to love this episode. But first, this episode is brought to you by Smart Music. Have you subscribed to the Smart Music blog yet? When you subscribe, you get notified of the best resources being brought to you by music educators around the globe. From podcasts filled with tools to add to your rehearsal toolbox, to live-streamed webinars to help you conquer burnout, to tips and tricks for dealing with copyright issues, and so much more. Go to smartmusic.com/blog and sign up today. Also, a big shout out to the dominating force in music notation, Finale. Did you know that the new Finale notation software is here? Finale version 26 automates tasks like avoiding collisions to save you time while retaining all of Finale's robust trademark flexibility. No more having to slide text around so it doesn't overlap with tempo markings or rehearsal letters. Create the music of your imagination more quickly and easily than ever before. Learn how at finalemusic.com. And now, my chat with Barry Green.
Well, I think we should start with the fact that I'm a musician first, a bass player. Was the principal bassist with the Cincinnati Symphony for 28 years. and I continue to be active as a bass soloist, not playing in any orchestra, but collaborating with small groups. Most recently, I have actually merged my identity as a double bassist and as the pedagogue, um, um, educator, author, clinician person on this mind, body, spirit aspect of our pursuit of artistry. And I've combined my role as a bass player with and a performer with this pedagogy as a means to spread that through music, actually through concerts. And the last 6 years, I've been involved in having this inspirational pedagogy in these 1 hour narrated productions based on what an artist goes through in 3 different stages of their lives in the pursuit of artistry. And it deals with the same subject. So now, instead of wearing 2 hats as both a musician and as a bass player, and then the guy who did the inner game and master music and bringing music to life, these other areas, it is really merged as a larger voice, which allows me more venues and more opportunities to share the message of what we all strive for, to become artists.
Yeah, I love it. And I think sometimes as music teachers, who this podcast is really for, we tend to forget that we were artists first, that we were musicians first. We get so caught up in all the logistics of teaching and pedagogy and program management that we tend to lose that part of ourselves, that we were performers first, and we obviously loved something about it, which is why we got into teaching in the first place.
So true. That's so true. Well, that is so important. Is what is it that attracted us to music from the very, very beginning, and how do we maintain that relationship to music, which was begun out of desire and out of joy and out of fun and out of discovery and illumination, and then when we make a career out of it, and we now have this different kind of a relationship with music that has to do with getting a job and maintaining a job, let alone adding a family and all the other things that we have to go through, then this relationship with music gets tested, and it has to coexist with all of the other things in our lives. But it's an amazing thing. While we have family, which is a lifetime commitment, and hopefully and often spouses for a long period of our lives, the music remains a musical partnership, which usually begins at a very young age and goes throughout our entire lives. And it's a relationship that's based on initially joy and passion and love and all of the things that we enjoy in music. And we often need to be reminded that this is one of the reasons why we do this.
Yeah, I love that insight. I'm the director of our community band. Like I mentioned, we call it the adult band, but we're ages 14 to 94. And so many of the musicians there, they're not like me. I consider myself a professional musician. I've played horn for 28 years or whatever, and still actively perform on it. But many of them just are into it because of that initial love of music, that initial love and connection, and to provide that opportunity to come back to it and find that love again. That's what inspires me when I do rehearsals, regardless of how antsy and nervous I am going into it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that's one of the anecdotes, is that it's all about the music and the whole technique of the inner game. Frankly, more recently, I've summarized it into a few simple, easy to remember one-liners. Is the technique of the inner game into 4 words. It's called turn up the music. And so that, and another aspect of the technique of the inner game as an invitation to the whole concept is this expression: find some sounds to drown out the shouts, or in what you're talking about, the anxiety. So what we're doing with the inner game is that we are literally going to the music and not only amplifying it, but finding the sounds and the things that are only music that will literally drown out or obliterate or take the place of that anxiety, because the anxiety is going to be there. But the question is, are we going to pay attention to it, or are we going to move away from it, or can we immediately have pathways that take us to the music and connect us with that in such a way we could manipulate our concentration and intensify it so that we no longer hear that anxiety or feel that anxiety. And that's the whole crux of it. It's very simple. Those two things: find some sounds to drown out the shouts and turn up the music. Then we get specific and we can get technical. And what are those sounds? And we can talk about that. But that's what we're after.
I love the simplification of that. And, you always hear get out of your own head, right? Get out of your own head. But what you're offering is a place for us to go when we get out of our own head, right? That's just so powerful, that statement.
You can't have it both ways. That's what so many people want. They want a sense of control. They want to be able to manipulate and know the outcome and all this. But there's no room for that, as well as this 100% concentration and absorption in music, period.
So what do you think of the term paralysis by analysis? Does that hit pretty close to home?
Well, certainly. If it's like being blind by a light, looking at the sun when you're driving on a sunny day and you're attempting to manipulate some curves. It's if you look into the distraction, it takes you away from what it is that you're doing, and you no longer have the tools with which to express yourselves. And we need a lot. We need our full mind, body, spirit, multisensory integration. We need so much to connect and do what we do in music. We don't have time, or we shouldn't have time, to be adding things on top of this, which have absolutely nothing to do with music whatsoever. It's having to do with fears and anxieties and our end results, our awards, our competitions, our personal appearances, the negotiating and remembering all the difficult things that we have done and what we're told what to do. There's no sounds to those things other than words. And if it's got words, it doesn't belong, because we're playing music, and there's music, unless you're a singer, is sound without words.
So can we jump in a little bit to the inner game? I love your ACT anagram, right? And
Yes.
The awareness one is probably the most familiar one to me, because it's so much like flow or mindfulness or being present. And these are things that I've tried to really practice a lot in my own life and in my own teaching and my own performing. So can you share with me a little bit about the awareness and the commitment and the trust, and what the difference is between those?
Certainly. The state of being that we're striving for is the dual state of what we call relaxed concentration. And that's where we're both calm, and at the same time we have the ability to remember literally everything that we've learned, and it comes through without any thoughts. It's just a mindless, effortless experience. We don't have that state very often. And when we do have it, it doesn't stay with us that often. It's human nature that once we are having a great time riding this beautiful wave of ecstasy and musical bliss, that there's going to be obstacles, which take the form of that voice, that take us away from that and put in all of those outer games into our attention, and we can no longer focus on the skills. Once we notice that we have diverted from that state of relaxed concentration, then we have a choice to either do battle with yourself, which we know doesn't work, or to turn to the music and turn up the music in one of our 3 skill areas. And that's where the awareness, commitment, and trust comes in. They're different skills, but they're all about music, and none of them have really voices that actually help us. They're the actual internal experience of music. Awareness skills are most associated with solving problems. It's just like if you're looking for something and you turn the light on and somebody says it's in the corner, you know exactly where to go and you find out what the problem is. And so awareness skills illuminate what's happening in the music, and without any instruction, we know instinctively just what to do. There's 4 sub areas of awareness, so that when we hear distractions and we realize we're off track, we need to go to one of the skill areas. So say if we choose awareness, just one area in awareness, we could choose amongst 16 to 20 different strategies in the 4 sub areas of awareness. And the answer to that is just based on what's natural and thoughtless in the music at that given moment. I mean, but the clear sub areas are sight, sound, feeling, and what we know about music. So there's visual awareness, there's sound awareness, there's feeling, and then there's the knowledge of what's going on, what you're playing. When you put your attention in any of these areas, it's the music, and we get involved. And then our ultimate goal is to stop doing that and go back to that state of relaxed concentration. Because the worst thing you could possibly do is use the inner game of music as a way to play music. It's a temporary strategy to get you out of trouble and save you time and go to the well where the water is, not where the poison is. I've never said that before. That's interesting.
That's all right. We accept all types of metaphors here.
All right. So that's what awareness is about. The example of the multiple techniques, visual awareness is there's looking at your body, looking at your hands, your posture. There could be looking at the notes, the music that's on the page. It could be looking at the line or contours that are in the music. It could be looking. There could be imagery inspired in the music that could be relevant to what you're doing. So there's everything from the physical posture to the act of playing to the note, the music on the page, to what the music represents in image. And these are examples of sub areas of one of the 4 areas. So you see how they add up. When you get to sound awareness techniques, you have just 4 elements, which is pitch, volume, timbre, and rhythm. And so if you heard that voice come in and mess you up, then you could just listen to the rhythm if that's what is going on. You just check out whether it's faster or slower, and you know what to do. Or it could be dynamics, or it could be pitch. So often when somebody says they're missing, making all kinds of mistakes in a fast technical passage, well, rather than trying to play it perfectly, just listening to the notes that you're missing is a whole different strategy. Well, you may miss 3 or 4 notes, not 50, and that's not so hard. So in the process of locating just the notes that you're not playing accurately, you start listening more attentively, and with that attention, you stop making mistakes because you're listening, and that's one of the ways we play music. And the problem becomes either almost fixed or completely gone away. And these are examples of the sound strategy. The third of the 4 awareness techniques is the area of feeling. And there's just two sub areas of feeling. One is tactile, as that if you're playing any instrument, something's vibrating, whether it's in your mouth or a mouthpiece or something that you feel with your fingers, a string, a vibration, a resistance. There's something that's going on there. And that is a meaningful source of a connection to the music, is the sense of tactile connection of vibration. The other side, which I'm sure, or I would think most of the listeners are most interested in, is our number one technique of the inner game, which is another awareness of feelings for overcoming anxiety. And that entails us being informed and sometimes educated to things that may not be in the normal pedagogy. And what I'm talking about is being conscious of two kinds of feelings. One, and they have to do with energy, the energy of the music and the energy inside your bodies. And for example, the energy of the music might be calm and peaceful, and yet the energy inside our bodies and performance is terrified and anxious. Okay, obviously the two are different. So when we are conscious moment by moment to the energy of the music, which will change with every phrase and within the different phrases. It could be a song of a particular style, like a lullaby, or it could be an exciting piece of music or a march or a dance. But within any dance and within any march and within any song or lament, there is going to be a curve. There's going to be a high and a low point, and there's going to be variations of that energy. We need to be conscious of that. It's not just dynamics and form. And often we're not taught to be responsible for what is the prevailing energy in every single sound that we're playing. And the other side is who tells us to monitor what's going on in our body as it relates to the energy in the music moment by moment. And the amazing power, I think, of this specific technique is that when you see where you are and you see where you want to be going or feel, it's simple. You can actually control your body to merge with that music and stay with it moment by moment as the music goes up, as it goes down. Sometimes we're playing music that is very exciting, and yet we're tired or bored. And so therefore our body needs to up our energy. Other times the music might be inspirational or quiet or more delicate, and then we have a excited body. But so this is the thing that I ask all educators as to whether it's in a private studio or whether it's in an ensemble experience. Do they know, or will you accept the responsibility to inform our students what's happening in this music, what it does represent, and how it's changing, so that they can also bring to that music with their own physical understanding and participation. And it also brings up another issue outside of the inner game, which deals with concentration, but it embraces a principle of the fact that we are performing with our bodies. We are not performing with our fingers and with notes and with dynamics and rhythms. And that what we are doing is we are communicating energy to an audience. And in order to communicate that kind of energy, we have to feel it ourselves. So a lot of people are raised or get lost in the journey of just phoning it in or making sure it's right or getting the right rhythms, the right notes, shorter, longer, faster, slower, as opposed to owning and embracing the role that we are like actors like anyone else, is that we are transmitting energy that was inspired by a composer or someone, and it's being put in our hands, and it's our responsibility to internalize that with our body and our breath, and use the notes on our instrument as our voice, as that international language. That's what we're doing. Not everybody believes that, but if you spend money to go to a concert, and when you want to participate in any inspirational form of entertainment, you expect to get something for your investment and for your time. And the bottom line is you want to feel something. So this is the other side of the feeling technique of awareness, which says, oh, we also have to feel it ourselves. We not only have to know what the feeling is, but we also have to feel it. And the way to stay on the energy train, if we want to do another metaphor, is to maintain both at the same time as they move through all these different terrains.
I love it. It goes back to that same, you're getting out of your brain, but you're giving it somewhere to go. So can I ask you a kind of more in-depth question?
Sure.
All right. I have to start with a little story. So a couple years ago, I decided that I really wanted to pull my horn out and get back to playing again. I'd taken a short hiatus because of some family issues. And the principal horn spot in our local symphony came open. And so my friend said, you should audition for this. And I was like, I should. It would be really fun. So I got the excerpts. I worked really hard. I practiced and practiced until I felt super good about it. Playing at home, I sounded marvelous. Can you tell where this is going? I get to the audition and I feel like I'm fine. I feel like I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. I walk in the door and there's people there. And just like that, my knees start shaking and my breath starts catching. And I get up to the stage and I can't stop my legs from shaking. And so if I had remembered my inner game training, then I could have done some of these techniques and gotten out of my own head. But what can I do ahead of time, like before I step on that stage or before I start to feel that, shaking feeling? Are there tips that you can give us for how to mitigate the risk that we hit that anxiety point in the first place?
Well, yes. First of all, you really have to believe in what you're doing and the directions you do with your concentration. If it becomes just a technique you hope to use to make yourself successful, that's not really going to be nearly as effective. In advance of when you play and an audition like what you're talking about, it's a long-term commitment. It's not just showing up and practicing in advance and then showing up and playing and then hoping that your knees aren't shaking. First of all, your knees may shake, and you've got to be prepared to once again turn up the music when that's happening. I mean, you could focus on your knees and fret over it and breathe or do whatever you have to do, but that isn't going to help you play. The things that you need to do to play, what they are, and so it's course correction. I mean, it's as simple as driving down the street. You're in an area where they have snow and inclement weather, and when it's no distractions whatsoever, it's so easy. You could listen to the radio. You could even talk to somebody on an iPhone carefully. But when the storm comes, all of a sudden you turn off the radio, you get focused, you listen, you have both hands on the wheel, you put 100% of your concentration in that because your life is at stake, okay? So an audition is, in a sense, a high stress and very important thing, depending on what kind of an audition is and what it is for you. The preparation for that begins when you make that commitment. And it could be months away, it could be weeks away, but as a bass players traditionally don't play solo music that often. I happen to be doing these productions so that I'm doing a lot more. But when I do have a performance, I'm thinking about that performance all the time, from when I have that date up to the week. And when I'm into the week, I'm thinking about the day and the whole experience. The whole thing is like you're getting your game face and your game attitude prepared for that moment. And you get to that place so that when you walk into that, your commitment to that experience is so high that you're going to be shielding yourself from the lack of preparation or doubt and fear getting in. If that the preparation has to be absolutely there, but the attitude that it's not just walking onto the stage, it's everything up to that moment. And for most people, when you do have that attitude, when you get to that moment, a sense of calm comes about, because this is what you've been waiting for. This is what you're trained for. This is what you're not going to. What's more important, your nervousness or the thing that you're about to do? Do you want to do it or do you not want to do it? We talk about courage. Actually, in the Mastery of Music, that's that second book. That was one of the chapters, and the chapter I went to horn players and percussionists to interview because they live in that world. And what we learned, right, there you go. I think you'll enjoy the chapter. But what we learned from horn players and percussionists, people like Dale Clevenger and Evelyn Glennie and the whole lot, is that the idea of courage doesn't exist, if you could believe that. Is that courage is really about choice. Is that it's like, what direction do you want to go? Do you want to fight with your nerves, or do you want to do what you want to do? And that you have up to the moment that you put that horn on your lips to decide, are you going to go for it, or are you going to freak out and backtrack? And unfortunately, that's more difficult in music than it is in sports, because in sports, at the greatest moments of a Super Bowl, you could call timeout. And you remind yourself of what it is, what the play is, and what it is that's going to help you. But in a Mahler symphony, when the movement starts, you can't call timeout and decide, wait a minute, I think I want to practice or warm up a little bit more. So this has to do with that whole approach leading up to that, as well as your commitment to what it is that you're doing, which is what you're choosing to do, to go through it or to not go through it. So just think of the fact that every time you give into your nerves, you've decided it's your own fault. You've decided that you'd rather be nervous and you'd rather not do this and just assume leave, or play badly, which is essentially forfeiting the experience. And sometimes we regret that we do that, but sometimes we take that decision and we don't go for it. When it comes to the place in the music, when you have a rest before a movement that starts, which is built around silence and then begins with a horn solo on a high note, that's another thing where in the silence, you're hearing that note, you're feeling that note, you're being there. So you don't go to the note on the note. Your entire energy is based towards the feeling of that note, and once again, the feeling inside. Once Harvey Phillips, this great tuba player, told me this story about playing an opera. And he said most people, he has this one of his operas, he said he plays like 3 notes in a 3-hour opera. And he says most of the tuba players, they've got it all figured out. They come in late, they bring their magazine, they do all this stuff, but they have it right down to the minute, and then they get out their horn and then they play their notes and they leave. But Harvey mentioned, he says that the 1, 2, or 3 notes that I play, are a part of every single note that preceded it for the last hour and a half up until that moment, and that he has to intently listen to every single thing so that when he gets to that note, he can play that note properly. And so that's another part of that preparation of getting to that moment, even though you're not even playing.
So, because he's not just playing the note, he's playing the music.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yes.
And it also entails the fact that when we do play music, do you only play your part, or are you playing your part of the whole thing, which does include that entire score, which I think is another whole discipline as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's all kind of part of that commitment piece of the ACT. So talk to me about trust. How do you view trust as part of this whole process?
Well, yes. I mean, like we talked about in depth with awareness, a commitment is these two sides of commitment is very, very simple, and it's all in advance. And we were talking about that. It has to do with the two sides. One is, how does the music go? And then how are we going to do this on the horn or in the ensemble or on the string or on the voice? Where's your articulations, your bow changes, your breathing, all of those things that you work out. But you got to know what it is that you're doing, and you got to really be clear to that muscle memory, to that point, so that that's clear, and anything can happen and nothing separates you from knowing what it is that you're doing. Commitment takes place before you play. That's leading up to that moment. Awareness techniques are in the moment by moment, paying attention, noticing, being aware of these elements in the music. Trust is the third aspect of the inner game, which is the most difficult single word because it can be taken two ways. The word trust. Awareness and commitment are really good words. They point us to the direction of what we have to do. But trust, we could think of trust as, well, we're just going to trust things are going to work out and hope for the best. Have faith. I believe that's important, but it's not the inner game use of trust. The trust has to do with the metaphor of embracing the energy that inspired the music. So if you're playing on the horn a piece that's a song or a lullaby, then you could trust the lullaby. If you're playing a piece that has these tremendous accents and exciting rhythms, then it could be, the accents could be explosions or knocks or hitting movements. If you're playing a piece that has contrasting themes, perhaps it could be a dialogue. It's a conversation where it's this and then it's that. And so what you're doing is you're trusting the conversation, you're trusting the excitement, you're trusting the calmness, you're trusting the beauty, you're trusting the song, you're trusting yourself in the future. Like when you playing an audition, if you want to trust the way you play at home and do a role play of the way you play in your studio or the way you play in a section surrounded by colleagues, as opposed to playing alone in front of three judges writing critiques about you, that's a whole different thing. We have the ability to abstract the qualities and the energies in the music, embrace them, and use them instead of the dynamics and the rhythms and the articulations and all the other Italian things that don't mean the same thing as a flow of energy that could be so many different things. And those are trust techniques. Trust techniques are infinite. They're unlimited. I've been doing the inner game for 36 years, I believe. And every time I ask someone how they feel about the music, what is represented in the music, how would they describe the music, I have never heard a repetition. The things that people are in people's imagination of what they believe is going on in the music, that that description is something that is unique to everyone. And so those techniques, there's no numbers, whereas, we've got 2 things about commitment, and we've got about 16 things in awareness, and the area of trust, you've got infinite possibilities, because the whole world has inspired the music that we play. And so we're tapping into everything that is around that we could put into music in the first place.
Yeah, and our own experience on top of that, which is why it's so individualistic.
Absolutely.
So as music educators, we're often conductors and leaders, and often we do it outside of our day-to-day school teaching job too, like myself. And I love that trust bit because we can utilize that concept as conductors to, milk that emotion, that trust in the music with our performers. That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
And the younger your groups are, when you talk about the music, that's the only language that you have in common, is to speak to them with gestures and descriptions of what this music represents. It's something like this, or it's something like that. Even the technique of playing, the Suzuki and the different modules that we use teaching children are all based on physical movements that are associated with something that's familiar to them, whether it's twisting, snapping, skiing, clapping, rapping, floating, sailing, whatever you can imagine. These are legitimate representations of things that the body has to do, and there are equal amount of representations in words, especially to children, but to all people, that are represented in music that we have to internalize so that we can feel them ourselves. And the conductor or the teacher is our guide that tells us what it's about. That's your job, is that we have to inform them what it is that we're playing, and bring that kind of energy. Unfortunately, I remember too well a time in my own Cincinnati Symphony many years ago, when this amazing conductor, Klaus Tenstedt was his name, this German conductor, was trying to describe in words the energy and the feeling of what was going on with this music. And he was so passionate, almost to tears, to describing this scene and what he wanted from the strings. And the second violinist just said, "Mr. Tenstedt, does that mean louder or softer, shorter or longer, or faster or slower?" And that was it. And that's where it stopped. But nowadays, our world is different. And our culture is different. And the way we're playing music and what the audience demands in terms of a concert, whether it's through media or in person, the musicians now have to embrace the fact that we're in a visual culture, and we have to be engaged physically and emotionally. And we have to know what it is that we're going to do, or we're not going to be hired. And people will not get what it is that we're doing.
So, as teachers, how can we take these first steps to help our students? Do we start with this trust piece as conductors, getting them to connect to the music and in that way kind of get them out of their head? Or are there some real beginner awareness things that we can help them learn? Any recommendations how we can infuse this into our students?
It's a language, and it's the way we talk. It's the way I'm talking to you, and it's the way you probably already talk to your students. The inner game, for me, I was able to articulate and understand by observing the way conductors conducted rehearsals while I was sitting in my chair in the Cincinnati Symphony. And I began to pay attention to what kind of instructions did the conductor give me that inspired me to look at the clock? And what kind of instructions did they give me where I forgot where I was? And I was so engaged in what I was doing. And so to illuminate the unconscious is a challenge. You hear that? To illuminate the unconscious, to figure out, have you ever figured out what you do when you fall asleep, at night? I mean, I've been going to sleep at night for 70 some odd years, and I still can't figure it out, that exact moment when I fall asleep. So it's that elusive, non-conscious state of concentration, how we could describe that when we're so involved and we're engaged, both as a performer and as a teacher. But it's in the language. It's in the relationship to the students. There's no doubt, there's no fear, there's simplicity, there's a demand for attention and concentration. And how I formulated the so-called rules of the inner game, which have been going on for thousands of years, because they're based on Eastern philosophy that's been around for thousands of years, as well as human nature, is just keep track of, this is a good instruction and this doesn't make sense. This makes me tense. It makes me ask questions. It makes me try to figure out certain things, and I can't just play. And so when you understand that, and it's your point of view, it's what you believe in and how you communicate, that will create a condition. There's no 1, 2, 3 steps. You start with this, you start with that, you start with that. There's no such thing as that training. It's literally, your people do never have to think or know anything about the inner game. I wouldn't even mention it in the classroom, especially. There's no time in rehearsal. They're not interested in that. They want to play music. And so your process and your point of view is you may use the principles of the inner game, which are principles that have been around for thousands of years, that are just simple, that is just nothing to do with the music. And the beauty of the inner game is that theory is pretty simple. There's 3 skills. It's all about the music. You can get very detailed and technical if you want, or you can just keep it really, really simple. If you're a little confused between trust and awareness and this, that, or the other, it doesn't make that much difference. It's the main direction. There's overlap of a lot of these techniques. It's not just exactly one thing or another. It's kind of a way.
Turn up the music.
That's right.
Get out of your head and into the music. I love it.
The best way of understanding the inner game is understand the outer game first. Is recognize when you're not connected with the music, okay, and the difference between the inner game and the outer game. And then once you know that, it's just like things start coming pretty natural. And the fact of the matter is, if you're hearing that voice, you got to put yourself to work. You got to look in a different direction. If you're, it's like fighting a fire. I don't fight fires. I run away from them. So who wants to fight a fire? I mean, you need firefighters for that, but we're not in the business of fighting fires. Is that what you want to do, is argue with yourself and be nervous? I mean, I thought we were trained to be musicians. So why are you messing with that? And then all the time that you spend on these silly techniques of things that are designed to make your legs shake less or breathe more or whatever, hold your breath, stop your foot in the ground, think of a naked person in the back of the room, whatever it is you do. I mean, what does that have to do with music? I'd say get the hell out of there and go to the music, turn up the music. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes, I love it. Yeah.
I'm not about stage fright. I once went to a conference and they gave me a name tag and it had stage fright on it. And they made me wear, that's the last time I wore a name tag ever. So if you ever see me at a conference, you'll know why I'm not wearing a name tag. But that's not what I do. It's everything but. And that's not my world. I can't help you with all those things because I don't know that much about it. But I could just tell you the other things that you could do that will connect you with the music and get you out of that room.
I cannot thank you enough for coming on my podcast and sharing all of this wealth of knowledge and inspiration with me. And thank you so much for all that you've done for musicians all over the world in the last 40 years. You have impacted so many lives, and you know that, right?
Well, I hear that. But as you said, we do this for ourselves. We do this to be better musicians. We do this. That's the selfish. That's the secret, is that we're lifelong learners and we get inspired. I mean, the journey that I've been on has allowed me to not just live with bass players, but to, work with people in all of the arts, and everything makes me a better bass player, makes me a better musician. And so I get to be in the front row learning from all the best in all over the world. And that's my payback. But if it's helpful to other people, I'm honored. I'm grateful for that too.
I know what you're thinking. Crazy good stuff, right? I took some massive notes during this episode, and I hope you did too. I've created a special download for you on this episode. I took some of Barry's best quotes and turned them into memes that you can share on social media. Just go to smartmusic.com/blog and search for episode 34. Enter your email and snag those free goodies to share with your followers, your students, and all those who need inspiration. So pretty much all of us. While you're online, be sure to navigate over to musicedsummit.org and learn more about the ultimate 3-day professional development conference to help you get the professional development you need while wearing your pajamas. The International Music Education Summit is filled with live-streamed, peer-reviewed, highly practical workshops you can watch from home. And since they're live, you still get to interact with the other attendees and ask questions of the presenters. Since the sessions are recorded and made available for you to watch later, you never have to miss a thing. Learn more at musicedsummit.org. Thanks again to Smart Music and Finale for making this episode happen. Thank you for subscribing to this podcast and sharing it with your like-minded music educator friends. Until next time, keep teaching on.